Hello, my name's Toby Hadoke, and this is Happy Times and Places, in which I watch Doctor Who and try to accentuate the positive, whilst seeing if I can guess what my special guests' favourite things about their chosen episodes are, whilst also dropping in the fact I might have met some of the actors once.
Hello, my name is Martin Jameson. I was born Martin Jacobs. And my father was Anthony Jacobs, who was an actor who some of you will know, played Doc Holliday in the 4-part Doctor Who series with William Hartnell called Gunfighters.
With a mic on my table and socks on my feet, it's time for episode 2, which I hope will be neat. I hadn't intended to do that, which is why it wasn't very good. I could have composed my own version, and instead this is all a bit of a surprise to me because I was supposed to be recording some pickups for Radio 4 Extra, and the people next door are playing the piano very loudly, so I can't. So I don't think I should send them the sheet music for the Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon. I hope the piano knows it. If I can darn tootin' hear it if it can. But that's fine, because I can do that at another time, and I don't think it'll bleed through to this. It's slightly different. But I just thought it was amusing that I was getting interrupted by piano play, which is what happens and I'm going to do, well, I'm not going to go around and shoot the pianist, because this episode is called Don't Shoot the Pianist, which I wouldn't do. Next door neighbours are very nice, and it's normally lovely hearing the piano playing next door, but it occasionally interferes with my voiceover work, but that's fine, because I will just do it at some other time, and instead I'm doing this, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching episode 1 of the Gunfighters. And the rather exciting thing is, because of the way that I'm doing, because I'm so behind with my Patreon commitments. I'm not behind, no, I am almost live when it comes to releasing my Patreon episodes. So what that means is I have feedback not only from listeners but also from Martin, who I sent the episode to, because and he says, I enjoyed listening to the audio on the flight to San Jose. Yes, funny to remember the Corrie connection. I remember I was introduced to Martin via Dolly Rose, who is now a star. Brilliant she is in Corrie. I didn't know her then. I had just directed Dolly in a play at 24/7 called Loaded by Jojo Kirtley. I had never met Dolly before then, and I was blown away by her riveting stage charisma. The play had its flaws, but she won an award for her performance. I knew in rehearsals that she was something special, so I emailed all the casting directors and producers I knew to come and see it. And that led to her coming to the street for a short term, and then the rest is history. So how exciting that, that in the genesis of Martin being on this podcast is also the making of somebody who is a major part of Coronation Street and a brilliant actress. And also she's great because I occasionally see her volunteering at the food bank up the road and stuff like that. She's a good egg. I don't think she's a Doctor Who fan though, and I don't know her well enough to ask her. I suppose I could get Shez to, but I have to be careful there. She did speak to Helen Worth about Colony in Space though for me, which was very nice. Anyway, enough Coronation Street, because I'm sure most of you don't even know who I'm talking about, because it seems to me there's the Coronation Street and Doctor Who Venn diagram has a very small yoke. Does it have a yoke, a Venn diagram? Very, very small middle bit. Anyway, but what this means is that a few people on Patreon have listened to episode 1 before I've recorded this, episode 2. So I can actually do feedback, which one doesn't normally do in Happy Times and Places because of the nature of the recording. However, James Lark, hi James, says, I love the Gunfighters. Though I too spent years under the Haining-influenced belief that it was the worst story ever. And let's remember that those words were written within a year of Time Flight going out. Good point, James. It still slightly baffles me that anyone would take this story that seriously. A, it is clearly meant to be funny, and B, it is clearly funny. But perhaps the forward-looking comic sensibility of cotton scripts is a bit subtle in the shadow of the knockabout humour of, say, the Romans, rather old-fashioned, even in 1964. But these episodes still stand as some of the funniest Doctor Who ever, even by today's standards, perhaps because, as I say, the tone is startlingly modern. even more evident in the novelisation. Stephen may stop short of calling himself Clint Eastwood, but the joke about his clothes beats Back to the Future 3 to it by 24 years. I'm also glad that you've drawn attention to just how good it looks, a real visual feast. Incredible, given their limitations. The song is the icing on the cake. I did my chronological watch-through with a fan who was far less versed in existing opinions about stories, and when we got to the end of the Gunfighters, he announced, unprompted, well, that's the best one so far. And maybe I agree. Thanks, James. And I just thought it was because I'd struggled to articulate why I think the humour of Donald Cotton is slightly more sophisticated, perhaps, than that of Dennis Spooner, or indeed the Romans. But I then struggle to think about what is sophisticated or not, because humour is actually about making you laugh. And actually, the Romans has loads of Latin references, whereas Cotton indulges in some terrible puns. So why is that? I don't know, but there just seems to be something slightly wittier, slightly more Woodhouseian. I don't know, because it's not. I don't know. But anyway, there is to me a difference between Cotton's humour and Dennis Spooner's, and I seem to think of Cotton existing on a higher plane, and I'm not sure that that's fair. So I'm arguing with myself even now, but I liked the way that James had put and articulated the different styles of humour between the Romans and the Gunfighters. So I'm happy to be able to sort of augment this broadcast with that well-put opinion. David Gillespie Pratt, I'm going to mention, one, because he's the listener previously known as David Gillespie, and as I record this, just recently celebrated nuptials I spotted on Twitter. So congratulations to David and his other half, and I wish you both an awful lot of happiness, and thank you for still existing round these ear parts, because I'm sure you've got better things to do, having just got married, gentlemen. But anyway, thank you, and lots of love and luck. And David just wanted to pop back and say he thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope you didn't listen on your honeymoon, David. And I quite like the cliffhanger too. A slow build of danger instead of a sudden ending. I've always enjoyed the Gunfighters, and I'm glad I'm not the only one. I take your point about the cliffhanger. Yes, okay, but my sort of instinctive gut reaction to it is, it's a bit sort of leaden. It doesn't have a sort of sense of impact that some do. But no, I take that. Frank Shales, regular correspondent, says, "Yeehaw! Now you're darn tootin' partner. One of the most fun stories in the entire run. As you can't have Daleks or dark SF every week, or even portentous historicals like the Aztecs, good as they are. Then there should be more like this one and the Mythmakers. Funny for kids and adults, without being Tomorrow People levels of silly." James Curray Smith, Jim Smith says, "Hurrah, the Gunfighters, just what I wanted. Perfectly timed arrival in the app for me, about to spend the morning painting my kitchen. I adore this story, I always have. Like you, I've had the worst story ever thing, but only second hand. I hadn't even read Doctor Who: A Celebration, but in 1990, a guy who copied bootleg Doctor Who for me for a small fee, that was illegal, knowing I paid in videotapes, no money changed hands, knowing I liked Hartnell, told me he thought it was the best Hartnell story. Gosh, I was suspicious. So he said, look, I'll do you a copy gratis. And he did. Hooray for him and you. And Martin's excellent memories of his dad and Hartnell having an act-off. Yes, indeed. Martin's a super guest. And a reminder, if for some reason you haven't listened to episode 1, Martin Jameson, prolific radio writer, prolific scripter for Holby City, is the son of Anthony Jacobs, who plays Doc Holliday, but he's the son of Anthony Jacobs, who plays Doc Holliday, who didn't write the Doctor Who TV movie. Jim Smith also says, if I'd had to pick my favourite moment from this episode, it would be Peter Purves' delivery of, well, let's hope the piano knows it, which might be the bit that makes me laugh most in all Doctor Who. I think I was talking over that, and I think you're quite right, Jim. It is a glorious moment of comedy, and Peter Purves, I think, deserves a knighthood for that delivery. It's fantastic. David Green is very pithy. The Gunfighters is simply fabulous, and that includes the song. And I too love the song, although I can sort of understand the people who don't. So that's a bit of extra material at the top of the show. But now put your guns away, because we're gonna put an embargo on any assassination of people displaying musical talent as I press play on Don't Shoot the Pianist, episode 2 of the Gunfighters, in 3, 2, 1. It's slightly incongruous, isn't it? This rather wonderful, moody sci-fi, these amorphous clouds and that echoing music from the very depths of space-time to lead into a sort of knockabout comedy about the gunfighters. I'm still obsessing over what I think it is that's different, and I'm not knocking Spooner, by the way, when I say this. I think Dennis Spooner's stuff is much more accessible. I mean, the way that Spooner feeds humour into Doctor Who, I think is sort of the template that Doctor Who, wouldn't be quite the same now without. Whittaker was a wonderful architect of Doctor Who, but then Spooner coming immediately afterwards to add that great gift for comedy and accessible sort of, pulpy drama that he had, but the wit with which he infused it. Is essential to the DNA of Doctor Who, whereas I don't think Cotton's caught on quite so well. Cotton, I imagine, is sort of like a slightly eccentric prep school master, writing little ditties for the end of term review, and everyone going, God, he should be professional, this guy. Peter Purves is, I think, heroic in this. I mean, Peter Purves responds. To sing whilst also being really pissed off is a great skill, and she owns this as well, doesn't she? Sheena Marsh coming in to distract everyone with her sort of ballsy femininity, if you can have such a thing. Yes, I wish she'd answered a few. Any letters that she got, but some people are private. Some people don't want to talk about A, their acting careers, or B, Doctor Who, and maybe even anything. But yes, I'm sure she was really called Shirley Knight. I have some footage of her somewhere in a video with her husband, who is a keep fit bodybuilder type. I love this high angle shot that they've got from the top of the stairs. That's very good. I mean, that's got to be a wig, isn't it, that she's wearing? And she's... And I mean, why not have a music... She's miming that, isn't she? Why not have a music... Yeah, she's not miming it very well, actually. I haven't noticed that before. But this is great, and there's a lot of movement. There's this wonderful high angle. I mean, he's making good use of the set, is... Rex Tucker, and I love the fact you can see the bullet holes behind the bar. And of course, the reason Stephen's playing the piano now and has sent Dodo away is because he was originally supposed to be playing the piano anyway. So they've had to sort of contrive that move to cover up the original move of Stephen having to sing in Dodo's stead because Jackie Lane couldn't or wouldn't. He looks great, Bill Herndl, there with his stubble and his sort of deadpan, threatening thing going on. It's only when he opens his mouth that there's a problem. I know Maurice Good had been appearing in a just finished, I think, appearing in a stage show before he was cast in this. So he's the most sort of high profile, really, of the Clanton brothers, and I know that his the decision to give Phineas a stutter was his idea. He's acting away in the background, isn't he, between Shane Rimmer and William Hartnell there. He's getting himself in shot. Is this bit where they do the in sync alive that he is, which is sort of quite funny. But I mean, Maurice Good's not doing much of an American accent there either. So I think when this has a reputation for bad acting, I do think it is the Clanton brothers who are probably the most at fault. But there's something, isn't there, about the Wild West that is it's got a sort of dirty danger about it, and it's been romanticized, but but you know, there are great examples of the genre where it's, I mean, oh God, Deadwood's wonderful, isn't it? If you've not seen Deadwood, that's how to do a Western. Whoa, really, with an Englishman, Ian McShane, being absolutely vile in it. But Hartnell is great at negotiating this, he's slightly, you know, he's slightly oblivious to the danger. Cotton sort of writes the Doctor as an accidental hero, is a bit of a loose word, but he's I quite like that, because I mean, it does make him slightly more clueless than he sometimes is. But alive, that is. They did their best with that, didn't they? But it's a pretty rum moment. And she's great here. Sheena Marsh, compounding the lie that the Doctor is Doc Holliday. Oh, and then it's brilliant because he gets the gun out, and Doc Holliday's shot the gun out of Seth Harper's hand. Now, would they have heard the shot from up the stairs? It doesn't matter. But it's brilliant. And then Hartnell decides he's got no choice but to join in, which is great, because he immediately sort of starts acting the part. But I like that little rapport that he has with, and this is brilliantly shot as well. We've got him and her at the bar behind the high shot of Holiday and Dodo there. And I like this little rapport that Hartnell has with Sheena Marsh, where he sort of go, so what should I do now? And she's going, I'll tell you what to do. He goes, yeah, absolutely, I'll do that. And you know, the performance is very clever at suggesting he's kind of asking her advice, and then he's implementing her advice with all authority that he can muster, which I think is lovely comedy. And actually, there's nice double acts in this, aren't there? He does that very well with her, and we have Dodo and Doc Holliday being rather super in this as well. Shane Rimmer is very good. Shane Rimmer, I think, is very authentic. Another lovely high shot, and I like the way they both enter like the real deal. And I love the way, yes, this is what I mean about Cotton's first Doctor, is that he's slightly clueless. He gets into trouble because he doesn't quite pick up, because he's this, which is a sort of way of making him alien. He, you know, the temptation with the Doctor often is to make you go, I've landed in this place and I know all about it. You know, if this was Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, she'd have gone, oh, brilliant, you're Wyatt Earp, you did this, that, and t'other. Whereas Tom Baker would even go, yes, yes, it was a time of, and these do that. Whereas Pert would go, Wyatt Earp happens to be a personal friend of mine. That's not what John Pertwee sounds like. But Hartnell, as written by Donald Cotton, sort of goes, who are all these people? And I'm not sure I understand how to behave in front of them, which is as legitimate a portrayal of this alien time traveller as any. And I think it's funnier than the Doctor sort of knowing everything. And I also think it's slightly less sort of earnest as well than the idea that, the Doctor travels around, remembers everything and knows everybody. And I much prefer, I think I've said this before, I much prefer the accidental traveller, the person who saves worlds and universes, not because they're special, but because they have a sense of humour, but also a desire to do what is right with often the scantest means at their disposal. Because that, I think, appeals. I think one has more of an in there with a character that is like that than one of some sort of lofty know-it-all, some omniscient wiseacre. Not that I think you can have Hartnell's Doctor like Donald Cotton's vision of him all the time. It wouldn't. I don't think the series would work. But I think it's a nice, to steal a phrase, holiday for the Doctor, for him to be this sort of slightly accidental tourist. These two are great. I totally believe that Kate and Holiday are an item, and a squabbling item at that. I really like the dynamic that Dodo brings to them. I think this is Jackie Lane's best performance and best story, and I buy this dynamic. I love the little look Sheena Marsh is giving there, that she's sort of she enjoys the game, really. She enjoys the play. She's kind of jealous of Dodo, but she's not really, because she knows that Doc will always go back to her. But and Kate's a great character as well. In this, what is often portrayed as a man's world, we've got a really sassy female guest character here who has real agency, and is very useful to the plot and to the character, and has a lot of spark. And I've got a real soft spot for Richard Beale there as Bat Masterson. I'm so glad we got him for the commentary, and I was able to spend a bit of time in his orbit. A very interesting man. He was with my agent for a bit, actually, with my former agent, one of my former agents, but I think we're still going at 96. Yeah, good man. And he's written a book, actually, Richard Beale, about his time in the Navy. So if you want to read a book that he wrote a couple of years before he died, from a Doctor Who actor, but that has nothing to do with his theatrical work at all. It's called, I think it's called One Man's War, something like that. I've got it. And it's Richard Beale writing about his time at sea. And that's all. I always think it's nice to read about people outside their Doctor Who work. Now, here is William Herndl, who... it's Fade to Black, isn't it? That's where you would have had adverts for foreign sale. William Herndl as Ike Clanton, I met a number of times. I didn't talk about him last time, did I? I reserved him for this time. But actually, I'll talk about him when we see him. Again, there's loads going on there with that card game. She flourishes it, and she thinks she's won. He flourishes it, and the whole thing is done. And she's slightly surprised, and he's beaten her, but then she takes that defeat well. And now they've got a little bit of banter, but then he really sort of snarls at her. It's a really layered and well performed dynamic that Doc and Kate have. And as I say, in that card game, it was all done through facial expression, which is two actors knowing they've got to keep going while the song plays out. And they fill the picture with performance, and I love that, which you don't get so much in today, when you can edit round stuff, and you've got more sort of camera angles at your disposal, and you can tighten things. This is sort of done in real time, and so it's up to the actors to drive the pace, to keep the audience interested. And as an actor myself, I find that I admire that when it is done with great skill or invention or imagination, or in that sense, just a little bit of sort of witty invention. I like that, because I can imagine how fun that must have felt to come up with it, and to know that you've sort of done the job. Beautiful to have a scene set at night. Lovely lighting here, and I think is this where Wyatt comes in, and we have a scene. Yeah, we have a scene between two guest characters, but who've got a great history between them. It's actually, I think, Rex Tucker shoots this really nicely. I think his pacing is occasionally off, and the tone is slightly uneven in places. But I think his picture compositions... I mean, Rex Tucker was going to be producer of Doctor Who. I remember it was always the thing... Well, it was once a thing in Doctor Who magazine where they in Gallifrey Guardian or something, they said, did you know that the original producer of Doctor Who was going to be Rex Tucker, and he did eventually direct the show, and it was the Gunfighters, the worst story ever, because that was sort of peddled everywhere. Rex Tucker was also great friends with Hugh David, who directed The Highlanders and Fury from the Deep, and was offered, according to Hugh David, the part of Doctor Who, and that's luster is added to that suggestion by the fact that if Rex Tucker was in charge, his good mate Hugh David, who was an actor in a thing called Knight Errant, but he would have aged up because he was a much younger man. But yeah, Tucker ended up not being producer of Doctor Who, but still manages to enter the annals of Doctor Who history by directing 4 episodes, but being credited on only 3 of them. So obviously it didn't end particularly happily. Anyway... So I suppose the fact that it was a production that had various not great things going on with it also compounded this the sort of fan view and those early historians not liking it. I love the fact that because he's a bit of a Bible basher, isn't he, old Wyatt? But he's not a real Puritan, because he's been nicking Doc's whiskey and then he takes it with him, and again, this is good work by these actors, because I believe in their relationship. And I think Doc Holliday, this is I think they're both great, but I think Doc's a great creation because he's sort of likable, but you never forget for a minute that he's actually got an angry streak and a raging streak he would rather dispassionately gun you down if he needed to. So he's a sort of likable rogue, but with a real sort of edge of danger about him. So here's Bill Herndl, who I know got on very well with Peter Purves, and I visited Bill at his flat in Camden, which was the flat he lived in when he was doing the Gunfighters, and he still owned. And as I say, we'd not managed to track him down when we were doing the DVD, but I did manage to get hold of him. I sent it to this flat's address, and his brother Colin was living there, and called me, I think, and said, Bill's going to be back from Thailand and he'll give you a call. And Bill actually called me when I was about 50 yards from his flat in a cafe interviewing Jaina Carpenter from Dalek, and I got this call and thought, well, I'll take that later. And I listened to the answer phone message, and it was Bill Herndl. And then I went to see him a couple of weeks later, and it was literally on the doorstep of where I'd first. So when he called me, I could have just gone and knocked on his door. But what an interesting life. He married a witch. I think he was married about 5 times. He inherited millions of pounds from an art dealer that he was a sort of factotum for, but then ended up losing loads of money on behalf of 2 investors who tried to buy an island that was going to be a nudist island that got infected with nuclear wastewater. And he was also the sort of personal shopper for Errol Flynn's wife, and spent a bit of time on the French Riviera with Errol Flynn, and actually saw Errol Flynn play chopsticks on the piano with not his fingers, shall we say, like that. And you wouldn't want to shoot that pianist, because of the size of his weapon would probably bring tears to your eyes. So what an interesting fellow William Herndl was. And actually he told me a lot of this off mic, because he wanted me to check it was all right. And so then when I came to record, it kind of wasn't as good as the first time he'd done it. So I witnessed that, really. And then I got him into the 50th at the XL, or was it the 52nd? It may have been the 52nd at the XL, and introduced him to Nick Briggs and Barnaby Edwards, and they very kindly chatted to him, and I think he felt a bit special that he'd been that I'd got him a couple of tickets for the thing. So he was one of the more interesting people I met. It's a real shame he wasn't on the DVD commentary, and he's since died. As I say, Bill, Sheena Marsh and Shane Rimmer all died in the same year, which wasn't that long ago, only 2 or 3 years ago. So it would have been lovely to have got all those guys back together on camera. I love this. Hartnell is so good. Mr. Werp is brilliant. I love John Alderson's sort of slightly resigned weariness to the stupidity of his of his charge. People keep giving me guns, and I do wish they wouldn't. I love that. I love the sort of comic interplay between Hartnell and John Alderson and Anthony Jacobs, Hartnell and Anthony Jacobs and Sheena Marsh is really, really lovely, and I think would perhaps be more celebrated were they not surrounded by some really not great acting from, and bless him, Bill was a mercurial character and an interesting guy, but he was no actor really. And I think he kind of knew it as well. He was as I say, he got lots of work because he was a networker. I mean, I got the impression on the French Riviera and in Thailand, he kind of he introduced himself to powerful people and said, "I could be so good for you," kind of thing, and sort of lived his life that way as a bit of a sort of networker and a doer. And in those days, you could sort of bluff your way into an acting profession. But look, he doesn't know how to stand, and he certainly doesn't know how to speak. He looks good though. I mean, the costumes are all great, and there's some wonderful publicity photos of all of the cowboy guys. They had a couple of good photo sessions in publicity for the Gunfighters. So this wasn't a story that was apologized for. And actually, it's a pretty decent production. And look, you've got a horse in the studio. I mean, that's not on film either. This is they've got he's so incensed that they've got his operating chair. Now, this, it's always... why isn't Shane Rimmer playing one of the Clantons? Because he is so much better than any of them, and he's about to get killed in episode 2. And he nearly takes the bar with him there, doesn't he? And I love the way that Anthony Jacobs tips his hat. And I love the way that Charlie is such a craven shite, because I'd forgotten about that. It's not sort of made explicit, although it does end up costing him his life. That he kind of, sucks up to everybody and then betrays everybody, and yes, pays the price. But that's not till next week. And did he smack her bottom then? Oh dear. But that's the kind of thing. I'm sure far worse things happened in the Wild West. And yeah, about now, Marshall. Yeah, so Hartnell's very good at slipping rather effortlessly between the sort of jolly comedy and the stark seriousness of the situation. And that's again, this is quite a small studio, and you've got that shot shooting through from the from the marshal's office into the street with all of these extras. This is very well orchestrated. Look at that. That's great. That's a brilliant shot. There's a man with a magnificent hat there. I've not noticed him before. I don't think I've seen it on the big screen. I've just seen I suppose he must have been suggestion that he was I think it was some sort of sombrero. Is there a Mexican vibe going on there? Again, it's another curious sort of way, because they have to kind of make way for the song to come in to do the coda, but then to also finish. So everyone has to do a sort of bit of business. But I quite like that pan from Bat to Wyatt to the Doctor, and Hartnell acting away in close up as he'd shown Peter Purves to do, have your hands up close to your collarbone or your face, because that's what the camera will do in those, and everyone gets a lovely close-up. It's so jolly. It's fun, isn't it? I mean, the whole way that Kate manipulates the mistaken identity part of it, the banter of what's going on upstairs, the fact that Doc's able to contribute by shooting the gun out of Seth Harper's hand, and so that makes them all think, oh my god, that this old geezer's a brilliant shot, and the way that's later's going to be the game's going to be given away, isn't it, by Charlie? And so it's the whole sort of, because the Romans is written up as a farce, but there's lots of farcical elements to this, with the mistaken identity and the people saying one thing and meaning another, and misunderstandings being compounded and blah blah. But it's a farce with slightly loftier ambitions, maybe, but also a very naughty and punny sense of humour as well. Now, I don't think... Don't Shoot the Pianist. I mean, that's a great title. A Holiday for the Doctor, which is, of course, A Holiday for the Doctor, and Don't Shoot the Pianist, are brilliant episode titles, which we would expect from the man who did the Mythmakers with Small Profit, Quick Return, and I wish... I'm sure he wanted to call episode 1 Zeus Ex Machina, which is such a good joke and ties in with what Look, I'll do the Mythmakers later at some point. I love the Mythmakers. I think it's so witty and such fun. And again, with all of the humour of that, he does capture the sort of grime of ancient Greece and Troy, and the he doesn't romanticize these guys at all. You could tell they've all got dirty fingernails and they probably all smell, and and the sort of cheapness of life in these situations. So the laughter is never far away from a gruesome death, and that's quite an odd sort of mix, isn't it? There's a dissonance to that, which I find really sort of interesting, because it's asking you to laugh at some highfalutin or sometimes quite sort of crass jokes, but everyone's sort of, but it's also sort of grimy and grim and deathly and horrible. And of course, both stories, give up the comedy about 10 minutes into episode 4 and go for a sort of bloodbath. It's curious, and yeah, I think it worked. And dissonance is what Doctor Who is all about, actually. You never want a story to give you what you expect, and some of the I've talked about this before. The dissonance is at the heart of Doctor Who. A ramshackle blue box that lands in front of a period setting where it sticks out, or a spectacular space setting where it sticks out, but in a totally different way. And that's what I love about Doctor Who, is placing the familiar in unfamiliar surroundings, and the ripples, dramatic ripples, character ripples, humorous, jokey ripples that all come from that. Now, I don't think Martin is choosing one particular thing. That's fine. I mean, there's not a league table for happy times and places, because if there was, I would be, it would not reflect well on me. I don't score very often. And it's sort of what I like about this is people take the brief and do what they will with it. But I still must choose a favourite thing per episode, and see if it chimes with anything that Martin is gonna give me. And I think, interesting, is it too loose to say I liked watching that this time, which was quite refreshing for me, actually, and not something that had particularly occurred to me before, although obviously it had subconsciously, is I like the comic interplay. I like the relationships between those I highlighted particularly. Jacobs and Marsh, Jacobs and Alderson. I believe those relationships. But Hartnell rises to it too. And he's obviously got a good rapport with these actors, because I love that sort of stuff he does with Kate, where he's going, and what should I do now? And then I love that people keep giving me guns and I do wish they wouldn't, which I think is a gorgeous line. And I just love that the way that the actors are taking those relationships and illustrating them, sometimes just with facial expressions, as with that card game that comes out of that first fade to black, but sometimes with differing tones and the sort of the gymnastics, the verbal gymnastics that they go through in order to portray those relationships, but also dispense the comedy, which is often about timing and pacing and modulation of delivery. And you've got all of that. And at its best there, as I say, in a story where some of the acting, I think, doesn't land. And sometimes I think, sometimes the actors are trying to do it and they're not necessarily up to it. That happens sometimes. And I think that maybe happens with the Clanton brothers, where they're doing they just haven't quite got what it takes to do it as well as it needs, because it's a fight comedy in a drama and in a science fiction drama, and that's for kids and also for adults. It's the timing of that and the judging of the tone of that is easy to. I was going to say it's very hard, but you get into trouble when you say things like that. Everything is relative. But it's it's certainly very easy to muck up. It's very easy not to judge well. And I think, these highly trained, highly skilled actors who are getting this right, Alderson, Jacobs, Hartnell, and Sheena Marsh, who I don't know much about, but I think is pitch perfect in this. have all, obviously it's rehearsed and all of that, but have all worked out exactly how to, I think, judge the comic interaction and the character work so right. But also I'm going to give an honourable mention to Purves, who I think, changes his performance of Stephen every story almost to lend the right tone to the adventure of the week, and is often the de facto leading man. He's not so much this time, but he has been on previous occasions in the Hartnell era, and he's I think he's hugely underrated, Peter Purves. I think he's a great contributor to Doctor Who, and I love him and Jackie Lane on the piano. I love when she gets pissed off with him and goes upstairs, says, "All right, you stay and play the piano for your new friend." I really like that. I think Dodo's great in this. I think Jackie Lane might be my choice for next week, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I think this is fun. I know there are people who, and I know that I know American friends of mine. Or people I've sort of witnessed talking at conventions or asking questions at conventions. I know, and it's very different, I'm sure, if you're an American watching Brits trying to do American, especially when they're not even good to my ear, and I'm not American. Whereas sometimes, you can be you can do an American accent that works well for a British audience, but in America you'd go, phew. And that's the same with the UK as well. There are UK accents that will probably land okay within an American audience, but sound a bit phony to us. I have to say, Tatiana Maslany, is it, in Orphan Black, is excellent, and the guy that plays her cousin, I haven't seen that for ages. We saw the first series and haven't seen the rest of it, and we absolutely loved it, so I don't know why we didn't follow it up. But those two are really, really good. But then you see then you do see the occasional American show where they do a bit in the UK, and America has an honourable tradition of over-employing British actors. Actually, we've been so lucky by the way the States have been very kind to our profession, but occasionally if something's filmed over there and they haven't hired an English actor, and you go, oh, hang on, that's a bit is that what you think we sound like? Because it's a mixture of sort of RP and Cockney, and the two don't quite gel together because they are very different things. But that said, context is all, because I remember Sons of Anarchy do a season, don't they, set in Ireland? And I was watching that and going, God, some of these Irish accents are terrible. And then actually, a lot of the actors were Irish. And it's something to do with the context. And also, probably you adapt your accent to the audience. So if you're being a Brit in an American show, Patrick Stewart does it slightly in as Picard in certainly in the early seasons of Next Generation, where he says command, whereas he would actually say command. And there's a few other words like that where maybe they've said, can you slightly Americanize some of your vowels in order that it doesn't sound too, so because that would sound too jarring or too British. So there is something about the audience that you're doing it to as well. So I think, lazy critics for me are ones that go, oh, well, so-and-so's accent was terrible. And quite often, it's always my glee to point out, well, you're actually criticising an accent that's their real accent, but you didn't know that. But that's a whole other thing. But I'm not. It's not my default mode to critique an accent, because I think often accents are picked up on for being bad when they're actually the person's accent. I think also the accent modulates depending on where the production is from or the company that actor is in, and there's all sorts of different things. But there's nothing more boring than somebody looking to criticize something and then just very quickly go, yeah, and the accents were terrible. I always think, well, I think you're just wanting to criticize this full stop, if that's your first port of call. We'll get to the accents at the end before you've got to anything else. But and I think, and certainly I think, Jacobs was an excellent voice man. John Alderson did American movies, and was pretty much, I think he was an American citizen by the end, even though he was born in London. And Rimmer is obviously Canadian, but that's good enough. So anyway, I don't know why I got onto accents, but anyway, my favourite thing is the comic interplay between those various characters that I mentioned. Martin Jameson, well, last time he had a big list, so let's see what he's got this time as his favourite things about episode 2, which, as you know, is called Don't Shoot the Pianist. And let's see what he has to say.
Wow. Well, I've just watched the second episode, Don't Shoot the Pianist, and in all honesty, I haven't really got a clue what's going on. It sort of ends with Peter Purves from Blue Peter, who's actually really good in it. He's really, really good, and he's going to be hanged or something if William Hartnell doesn't come out or something, and he wiggles his fingers in front of his face. Anyway, it's a really mad episode because there's lots of people threatening people, and I said before that they were the Claytons. They're not. They're the Clantons. I don't know if that makes a difference. And there's a really weird bit where my dad appears at the top of the stairs, and you think, how did he get there? Because everyone else has to come along the street, but he appears at the top of the stairs. I don't know whether I missed something there. And there's some sitting around with some cards, and it's a wonderful bit where he gets the cards out and he flicks them, and he's obviously supposed to deal them in a really flash kind of gambler way. But my dad was very skilled in many things, but I don't think dealing cards was one of his. I suppose it's like actors put that they can horse ride and fence on their CVs. Maybe my dad put that he could deal cards, but he couldn't deal cards, so they had to cut out of that shot. Anyway, well, it's all terribly exciting. As I say, I haven't really got a clue what's going on, but it's all very enjoyable. And the next episode is called Johnny Ringo. So I'm gonna watch that now.
Well, that is very nice for me to hear Martin sing the praises of Peter Purves, because again, Peter comes with a lot of baggage, and I think to a certain generation or a couple of generations, it might be easy to just watch an old Doctor and go, oh, it's got the guy from Blue Peter in it, so that's automatically compromises our ability to take it seriously. And that's no reflection on Peter. That is, well, it is a reflection on how indelibly he is in our heads as an excellent presenter of children's television and then sports programming. But he's also a really good actor, and so I'm very, very chuffed that Martin was able to watch and acknowledge that. And that we're able to publicly voice a bit of affirmation for the mighty Purves, who will forever be remembered as an icon of television presenting. And I remember being so surprised to see that he'd been in Doctor Who. The first inkling I had was a picture of him in the Celestial Toymaker in the 20th anniversary Doctor Who Radio Times special. That's Peter Purves. And it's a constant joy to me how good he is in it. And he referred to me as a friend of his recently, and I was extremely touched. And I think it's amazing that because he also didn't give many interviews about Doctor Who in the early days either. He wasn't snooty about it. He was really, really busy. And then he sort of said he didn't really have much to say. And I'm sure there was one point when he was attending his last convention, and he's done loads since. But he always gives good value. He's he knows exactly what is required on interviews and presentations and all of that sort of thing. He's a real pro. But he's on a personal level, he's I find it a bit weird and slightly amazing that he's nice to me and seems to like me, and has been very helpful on a couple of things. And as I say, and so it's a pleasure to see people acknowledging him, because I remember when I first saw these stories, when I got them as back in the day as Brilliance, going, wow, he's really good. And of course, you shouldn't be surprised that an actor is really good, but as I say, so much baggage. So I'm not gonna shoot the presenter or the pianist. And actually, just as I was going through the computer to try and make this work, this is live. Trevor Smith, another patron, has clearly just watched episode 1 and fed back. So this is freshly minted feedback that Trevor says, "Wow, what a fantastic episode. What a treat to have Anthony Jacobs' son, and it's not Matthew. Hearing his memories of his dad's research for the role was really interesting. For the record, I love the Gunfighters. Great sets, great story, very funny in places, and as you quite rightly said, Toby, it's Dodo's best story. Very much looking forward to the other 3 episodes." Well, this is the first of those 3, the second of the 4, Trevor, and you have timed that perfectly, like all good pianists, to get yourself in just before the end. So we'll do a final flourish, and I'm not going to try and improvise another verse because you might want to shoot the vocalist. Until next time, goodbye. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places and for not shooting the podcaster. That's me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest is Martin Jameson, who can be found on Twitter at SmartArts. That's arts with a Z. I'm grateful to Martin and to patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include, well, Nick Tedston, who I'm also wishing happy birthday to for recently, and also David Gillespie Pratt, who has recently entered into the blissful state of marriage. Congratulations to you both. Other patrons are available, and they include Gareth Bowley, David Brody, Hugh Buchtman, Tim Burrows, DC, Paul Cunnington, Anthony Carroll, Damien Cartin, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Steve Churchill, Kevin Clark, Mark Clues, Graham Cluley, Mark Cockram, Charles Coffin, Simon Coling, Paul Colnaghy, Ben Cook, Martin Cook, Matt Corner, Leslie Coots, Ben Cowdell, Philip Craggs and Lee Kremin. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And you may wish to check out the Patreon that I talked about and that you heard from there at the top of the show, where people come on and, respond to the episodes that they have heard, and they sometimes influence what I might do next time, or give me something to think about or ponder over, and it's generally nice, and nobody's sort of mean or annoying like they are in the forums and other areas of cyberspace. Well, they haven't been so far, touch wood, eh? But it's a really nice place to be. I'm very grateful to it, certainly, and if you fancy coming along, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for as little as £3 a month, you would have got this podcast 6 months earlier. You would also get 3 releases per week, and that doesn't include the picture of my dog on Tuesday, some exclusive releases, some bonus material. All material is well in advance of when it goes out on iTunes and Spotify and Patreon and all of those places. 6 months, as I say, for Happy Times and Places, a month or so for Indefinable Magic and Too Much Information, and there's an exclusive patron-only podcast called Far Too Much Information, and monthly AMAs, and all sorts of other goodies. £3 a month with 10% off if you sign up for a year in one go. And that's 10% off any tier, and the tiers go all the way to gazillions. The adern tootin' they do. I mean, they actually don't, but if you want, I'm sure it could be arranged. If you can't or don't want to do the monthly commitment, there are no bonuses if you go to ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke, but it is a way of, essentially slinging something into the tip jar if you feel so inclined, and I'm grateful to that. As a self-employed artist in these trying times, it's a model by which we now tend to, a lot of us, make up a portion of our living, and I hope I am producing enough to justify that, and I'm always receptive to feedback as well. So if I'm not, you can contact me and we'll talk. But anyway, it's a good way of making me be productive as well. I was talking to the comic Rob Rouse last night, and he was the person who advised me about Patreon actually, and we said it's a good way of making sure we're constantly producing. So I hope you like what it is that I am producing, because producing I am, even if some of it is quite close to the wire. But yeah, Ko-fi is a way that you're not committed. But I know times are tough. Everything's really expensive. The country's going to hell in a handcart. So if if what you do is listen to these, that is enough. It justifies me doing them, and I'm very, very grateful. But if they give you a diversion or a bit of entertainment while you're, like Jim, painting the kitchen, or if you're out for a walk, or I know David said, it helped him do a run. I'm happy to accompany, to dribble into your ears while you're doing all of those things. And if you so enjoy the dribble, please go to iTunes or anywhere else online, but iTunes is particularly helpful, and give these 5 stars and perhaps a few lines of review, and spread the word on cyberspace, tweet, Facebook, do all of that stuff. It just really helps to get word out there and to make more people listen to, not make, encourage more people to listen to these, and it then justifies me doing this at this ridiculous hour and at this pace. And, it's just, it costs you a little bit of your time, and it would really help me. Thank you so much. I'm a stand-up comedian, have been for 26 years, and I run a comedy club in Manchester called Excess Malarkey every Tuesday. Come and see that. That's on Twitter at Excess Malarkey. There's also a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, which has got some clips from the shows that we did during lockdown, where we kept comedians worldwide in employment, paying $4 per week and putting on shows while we were all stuck behind closed doors. But the live shows are back every Tuesday in Manchester at 8 p.m, and we have a Twitter feed at Excess Malarkey to get all the latest information about the club. We're also on Instagram at Excess Malarkey as well, as am I at Toby.Hadoke. I'm not very good at the Instagram, but I'm trying to get better. I've just learned how to edit reels. I'm a bit better on Twitter at Toby Hadoke. These podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts, and I have a page on Facebook. I mean, I'm me on Facebook as well, but I've got to the limit of friends because I said yes to everybody. I mean, I've got so many friends, but I've met about 4 of them. So I'm moving over, putting all work stuff on the page rather than the me, if you see what I mean. So it's Toby Hadoke's comedian page rather than my personal page, because I want to put sort of family stuff on there, which perhaps isn't for going out there for people who are only interested in my TARDIS collection. And that seems fair enough. But yeah, do all that stuff, because online is how we seem to do things these days, and it all helps with my algorithms, which, need to stave off the rust. I'm sure when they started out, they were about 35 minutes long. How am I managing to hit nearly an hour for 25 minutes about Doctor Who? It's because I don't shut up. Anyway, I hope it's of interest to you. And that's... Sorry, I'm just being shouted at by technology. I've got a funny speaker thing that sounds like the sort of bongo when it decides to stop working, when it's no longer paired. All this modern technology. I'm pretending not to understand it. Well, no, I don't really. Do I understand it? I don't know. I can do this, so I'm clearly I was going to say no Luddite, but actually people say Luddite when they mean somebody who's not very good with machinery, whereas Luddites are actually a bit more proactive than that. It wasn't that they weren't great with machinery. They smashed it to bits. That's taking not great to quite a boss level. I don't like it's not so much as dislike. It's active desire to destroy. But anyway, let's not get pedantic about language, as a podcast that should only be half an hour has doubled that time, and we're in the bit that's the post credits bit, because essentially this is really just a waste of everybody's time. Anyway, I'm glad I wasted it with you, dear listener.